He actually cried when I brought it up. That's the fragility we need to talk about. My girlfriend told 40,000 podcast listeners after promising she'd never turn my secrets into content. I took my earbuds out, called my lawyer, and never argued with her once. When she accepted the manila envelope at her live event, she looked across the room and couldn't say a word. There is something nobody tells you about trusting someone with your most private moments. I didn't know that the person you give those moments to can decide, one afternoon, that those moments are content. By the time Qley walked into her own live event 3 weeks later, her sponsors were already gone. Let me back up. Qley and I had been together for 14 months when this happened. She was 28, a content strategist at a digital agency during the day and the host of a podcast called The Empowered Hour the rest of the time. She had 40,000 subscribers, 3 active sponsors, and an editorial calendar she kept in a color-coded spreadsheet on her desktop. I was a software engineer at a mid-sized company. I did not listen to many podcasts. I knew enough about hers to ask reasonable questions at dinner, and that was enough for most of those 14 months. I admired the way she worked. She had a kind of focus that other people called intensity, and she called necessary, and I did not argue with either version. She built the show from nothing over about 2 years, and she was proud of it in a way that felt earned. I thought I understood what I was in. There were 2 things I thought about later. The first was a phone call I overheard from the hallway. She was talking to her mother, and the conversation sounded difficult, and when she hung up, she was already writing things down in the small notebook she kept on the kitchen counter. When I asked what she was writing, she said, "It's not about her specifically, it's about the dynamic." I nodded and left it alone. The second was a name. A friend of hers, a woman named Sandra Briggs, stopped speaking to Qley that past spring after an episode aired that covered something Sandra had shared with Qley in private. Qley's explanation was that she had changed enough details to make it unidentifiable. She said, "Sandra's being oversensitive. The story is bigger than one person's feelings about it." I did not say anything. I should have said something. 6 months after the Sandra Briggs situation, I told Qley something I had never told anyone else. I told her in the dark, with the lights off, which meant I thought I was safe. The text from Greg Caldwell arrived on a Wednesday morning while I was still in my kitchen. It said, "Hey, is this about you?" with a link underneath. I was already dressed for work. I put my earbuds in, sat down at the kitchen table, and pressed play. The episode was called Men, Vulnerability, and the Silence We've All Agreed to Keep. There were 3 voices. Qley's, which I knew the way you know a voice that has talked to you in the dark. Diane Hartley's. Her regular co-host, whose cadence I had heard described over dinner more than once. And a third, Rachel Moore, a guest Qley had mentioned was coming on this season. They were about 7 minutes in when I heard my name. Not something close to it. Not a description I could convince myself was general. Qley said Patrick the way she said it when she handed me something she wanted me to look at, certain, deliberate, already assuming my attention was there. She said he was a software engineer in his early 30s. She said they had been together over a year. She said she wanted to talk about something that had come up between them, something that illustrated what the whole episode was really about. I sat with my hands flat on the table and I listened. Then she said this. "He actually cried when I brought it up, and I thought, this is exactly what we mean when we say men can't handle vulnerability. That reaction is the fragility we need to talk about." A pause on the recording. Then Diane said, "And you came to that conversation from a place of care? You weren't trying to make him feel bad?" Qley said, "I think so. I genuinely believe men deserve a space where these things are discussed openly. I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I'm trying to help." I took my earbuds out and placed them on the table. I did not call her. I did not throw anything. There was something underneath that might have been anger, but it was behind a different layer entirely, something quiet and clear, the way water looks when you can see all the way down to the bottom. I sat at the kitchen table, and I started measuring exactly what I was looking at. What I was looking at was this. 6 months before this morning, I had said the exact words, "Please don't use anything I tell you as content. This is not a topic." She had said, "Of course not. I would never do that." I had believed her, because it was dark, and I was lying down, and I was holding her hand, and I thought the person who said that and the person with the editorial calendar were the same person. They were not. I called Tom Weston that afternoon from my car. Tom and I had gone to college together, and for the past several years he had been at a law firm that handled media and privacy cases, something I had filed away in the back of my mind without ever imagining I would need it. I did not call him because I had decided what I wanted to do. I called him because I needed someone to explain to me what I was actually looking at from a legal standpoint, and Tom was the only person I knew who could do that without first asking me how I was feeling about it. He picked up on the third ring. He was at dinner. I could hear the low noise of a restaurant behind him. I gave him the short version, the episode, my name, what she had said, the 40,000 subscribers. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for 2 full seconds. Then he said, "Send me the link. Don't respond to her. Don't text her. Don't post anything. Just send me the link." I sent it before I started the car. He called me back at 10:15 that night. He had listened to the whole episode. His voice was different when he called back, not warmer, but more precise, like something had come into focus. He said, "Patrick, this isn't just bad behavior. This is actionable. I want to talk tomorrow morning." I hung up and sat in the quiet of my apartment for a while, looking at nothing in particular. And for the first time since Wednesday morning, I did not feel like I was standing alone in this. The next morning, Tom laid out what he was going to do. Qley had used my real name, described identifying details about my occupation and the length of our relationship, and disclosed specific private medical information I had shared with her in confidence. Tom said he would draft a cease and desist letter and file it directly. He said he was also going to contact the 2 primary sponsors of the Empowered Hour, a home goods company called Hartwell Home and a wellness supplement brand called ClearPath Wellness, with a copy of the episode and a formal written notice. I did not need to do anything except sign what he sent me and keep every communication in paper form. The week that followed was ordinary in the way that only waiting can be. I went to work. I pushed code. I had lunch with a colleague named Brian Stafford at the same diner we went to every Tuesday, and I ordered the same thing I always ordered, and we talked about something I could not recall an hour later. I did not check Qley's social media. I did not open the podcast platform. On a Thursday evening, looking up a contact address Tom had asked for, I opened Qley's website and saw a banner for an upcoming event. The Empowered Hour live at a venue on Clement Street, 3 weeks away. 80 tickets. Already sold out. I wrote down the address. She was planning her biggest live event yet. I thought she deserved an audience. 3 weeks later, Friday evening, 6:55, Tom and I crossed Clement Street together and went through the front door of the venue. I took a position near the back wall and stopped there while Tom kept walking toward the front. The space ran deep and narrow, with about 80 chairs in rows facing a low stage. String lights ran in warm yellow clusters along the ceiling, and behind the microphone stand a purple banner read "The Empowered Hour Live" in large white letters, the kind of banner that takes a few weeks to order and costs more than it looks. Most of the seats were already taken. Qley was at the front of the room near a small table with a laptop, her back mostly to the audience, gesturing at the screen while talking to someone I didn't recognize. She had not looked toward the back of the room yet. Tom had the manila envelope in his right hand. He straightened his jacket and walked forward. Tom moved through the seated crowd the way someone moves when they have a specific destination and a specific amount of time, not fast, not pushing, but with the kind of steady forward momentum that makes people step aside without being asked. A woman near the far end of a row shifted her bag off the aisle seat without looking up. He nodded once and kept going. He had the manila envelope at his side, and he carried it the way you carry something you have been holding for a while without effort, without drawing attention to it. The room had not changed around him yet. It was still just a room full of people waiting for a show to start. About halfway to the front, a young woman in a purple event shirt stepped into his path from beside the refreshment table. She asked if she could help him find his seat. Tom told her his name and said he had documents to deliver directly to the host of the event. She looked at the envelope in his hand, then at his face. She said she would need to get the event manager. Tom said, "That's fine. I'll wait right here." The event manager came through a side door 2 minutes later, a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s with a clipboard, the kind of person who had seen enough variation at events to approach problems with his face neutral. Tom said 2 sentences to him. The man looked at the envelope, looked at Tom's face, then stepped aside. When Tom was about 10 feet from the front of the room, Qley turned around. In that first moment, her face did what a host's face does when an unfamiliar person approaches during setup. She tilted slightly forward, expression open, professionally welcoming. She did not recognize him. She was still entirely in the mode of someone whose event was about to go the way she had planned. Then Tom shifted slightly to his left, and Qley had a clear line of sight to the back of the room to where I was standing against the wall. I watched her face. The welcoming expression didn't disappear, it was more like the structure behind it changed. Something around the eyes and the jaw went quiet. She looked at me for about 2 full seconds without moving. Then she straightened up and looked around the room for Diane Hartley, probably, or for whoever's job it was to handle something that was about to go wrong, and she did not find the right person fast enough. Tom was already in front of her. "Carrie Wallace?" he said. She looked at him and said, "Yes." He said, "I'm Tom Weston. I'm counsel for Patrick Brooks. These are for you." He held out the envelope. She took it. Her hands were steady when she took it. Tom described that detail to me later, and I have not entirely decided what to do with it, so I am including it the way he gave it to me. She said, "Lower now. I don't think this is the appropriate place for this." Tom said, "You chose the venue, Miss Wallace." He said it without emphasis. It was not a threat. It was simply a statement of fact about who had made which decisions. A woman in the front row who had been sitting there since before we arrived turned around in her chair and looked toward the front of the room. The event manager, still near the side wall, had his arms at his sides and was watching. Diane Hartley, who I could see standing at the far end of the refreshment table with a glass of water, set the glass down on the table slowly, the way you set something down when your hands suddenly need to be empty. Tom stood where he was for another 15 seconds. Long enough that the envelope in Carrie's hands became the thing that everyone near the front of the room had looked at least once. Then he said, at the same register he had used for everything else, "The sponsors have already been contacted. The episode has been reported to the platform. If you have questions, your attorney can reach us directly." That was the moment Carrie no longer controlled the story. Not because anyone raised their voice. Not because anything dramatic happened. It was because the room, her audience, the 80 people she had sold tickets to had just heard that this situation was already documented, already filed, already in spaces she could not get to. She did not respond. She did not turn to the audience. She did not look for Diane anymore. Carrie stood there holding the envelope with both hands, her eyes on the floor between her feet. The event manager was watching from the side. The woman in the front row had not turned back around. Diane Hartley had not moved from where she was standing. Carrie just stood there with her hands around it and did not say anything at all. Tom found me near the back wall about 8 minutes after he had walked to the front. He told me what he had seen up close: the volunteer with the purple shirt, the event manager with the clipboard. The moment Carrie looked across the room and saw me standing at the back, the expression on her face when she did. He said her hands were steady when she accepted the envelope. He said Diane Hartley had not moved from where she was standing by the refreshment table. I told him that was what I needed to know. Less than an hour after we left Clement Street, I got a direct message on Instagram from Diane Hartley. She had found my account without me knowing she had it. The message said, "I didn't know she was going to use your name until the episode went live. I want you to know that. I'm not going to be part of this anymore." I read it twice, saved it, and put my phone face down on the seat beside me. I was somewhere on the other side of something. I was not going to try to name it that night. Tom had documents for me to review and sign over the next 2 weeks, and I needed to get home and start printing them. I called my mother on the drive back. She asked if I wanted to come for dinner on Sunday. I said yes. 3 days after the Clement Street event, Carrie posted a statement on Instagram and on Twitter. It was long. It described what had happened as a coordinated campaign to silence a woman who dares to speak about men's health. It called Tom's appearance at the live recording targeted harassment designed to intimidate me in front of my own community. It did not mention that she had used my real name without my permission. It did not mention that I had specifically asked her not to use anything I told her as content. It did not mention the lawsuit. Her existing audience largely rallied behind the statement. Some comments were predictable declarations of solidarity, assertions that the conversation she was trying to start was being weaponized against her. I did not read most of them. Tom monitored what needed to be monitored for legal purposes, and I let him do that. Then Carrie made a decision that could only be explained by a genuine belief that she was the one who had been mischaracterized. She uploaded a clip to her stories, a short excerpt from the original episode, which had been taken down from the main podcast platform. The stated purpose was to prove that her words were being taken out of context. The clip she chose was approximately 45 seconds long. It was the most damaging 45 seconds in the original recording. It contained the quote, her voice saying it, with no surrounding context that might have made the sentence easier to hear. That clip traveled further in 24 hours than the full episode had in 2 weeks. It reached people who had no prior knowledge of Carrie or the show, And those people formed their first impression of her entirely from those 45 seconds. The comments on that clip were not the same as the comments on her statement. Carrie had reopened a door she believed was already closed in her favor. She walked back through it and could not understand why the room had changed. Tom forwarded me an email on a Thursday afternoon, about 2 weeks after the Clement Street event. He sent it with a single line at the top, "For your records." The email was from a legal contact at ClearPath Wellness. 3 sentences long. The first acknowledged receipt of the documentation Tom had provided. The second stated that in light of the circumstances, ClearPath Wellness had made the decision to pause their partnership with the Empowered Hour, effective immediately. The third offered a contact point for any follow-up questions. Tom had told me to print everything and keep it in physical form. I printed the email at my desk and read it that evening at the kitchen table. I set it flat on the table and sat with it for a minute. There was a particular kind of quiet in the room, not a comfortable quiet, but the kind that follows after something ends somewhere in the distance, and you are aware the sound is not starting again. I looked at the paper. I did not feel anything I expected to feel. Something Carrie had said came back to me, from about 6 months before the episode came out. She had called me from her car, pulled over on the side of the road, because she had just gotten off the phone with the ClearPath Wellness team, and they had confirmed the sponsorship. She said, "Patrick, this is the one. This is the one that makes it real." I had been in my kitchen when she called. I remembered her voice through the phone, the particular sound of certainty in it, the way it had when she had arrived somewhere she had been working toward for a long time. I folded the email in thirds and put it in the folder Tom had given me for physical documents. I had a meeting in 20 minutes. I needed to get back to my desk. That Saturday, I woke up at 9 in the morning without an alarm. I lay still for about a minute, waiting to feel something that needed to be handled. There was nothing that needed to be handled. I made coffee, opened my laptop on the kitchen table, and started working on a project I had been wanting to build for nearly 2 years, a small tool for organizing code documentation, the kind that mattered only to the person building it and no one else. It was the kind of work I had done in 1-hour pieces when I had an hour to spare, which had not been often, because there was always something else going on. A guest Carrie needed to prep for. A sponsorship pitch she wanted feedback on before the deadline. A recording schedule she needed me to remember. I worked on it for about 3 hours that morning. I got further in those 3 hours than I had in the previous 8 months of interrupted sessions combined. At some point, I got up to refill my coffee and stood at the kitchen window for a moment, looking at the street below. A couple was walking a dog past the building. Someone was unloading grocery bags from a car. Then I sat back down at the table and picked up where I had left off. 2 months after I signed the last of the documents Tom sent me, Diane Hartley texted and asked if she could buy me a coffee sometime. She did not explain why. I thought about it for a day, then said yes. We agreed on a place near where I worked, a coffee shop on Hayes Street, with small round wooden tables and floor-to-ceiling windows that faced out onto the street, the kind of place busy enough in the mornings to feel anonymous without trying. I got there first. Diane arrived about 8 minutes later in a gray wool coat, and she said thank you for meeting her before she even sat down. I said it was fine. We ordered and sat across from each other, and for a moment neither of us said anything. She had left the show 2 weeks after the Clement Street event. She told me she had called Carrie and said she could not continue, and that Carrie had not responded well to that conversation. She said Rachel Moore had also stopped answering Carrie's messages within the same month and had removed all references to the Empowered Hour from her social profiles. Diane said she had not spoken to Carrie directly in 6 weeks, and she said it the way you say something you have processed enough times that it no longer surprises you when it comes out of your mouth. Then she picked up her phone and set it on the table, facing me. She had the Patreon page for the Empowered Hour open on her screen. The banner at the top still displayed the ClearPath Wellness logo from before the partnership ended, but when she tapped the link, the page returned a broken link error. The subscriber count was visible without tapping anything. The number was 34. The previous year, Diane told me, it had been over 800. She scrolled to the main website's events calendar, still live, still up, and it was empty. The last entry listed was the Clement Street show. I looked at the number on her screen. 34. Diane set the phone face down on the table. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. Then she said, "She told me after Tom filed that she thought you'd be too embarrassed to actually pursue it." She was not editorializing when she said it. She was reporting something she had been holding for a while and had finally decided someone else had the right to know. I heard the sentence. I let it sit in the air for a moment. Then I finished my coffee. I paid for both of us. Diane said I didn't have to. I said I wanted to, and I meant it. We stood up from the table and I pushed my chair in, and it made a small, ordinary sound on the floor when I did, and then we walked out. I don't have a podcast. I don't have 40,000 people who follow what I say. I have a project on my laptop that I work on Saturday mornings, and that is somewhere around 65% done, which is further than it has ever been, and getting there at the pace it gets there when nobody else needs the hours. Tom and I had lunch last week at the diner near his office. He ordered the same thing he always orders. We talked for about an hour about things that had nothing to do with any of this. My mother calls on Wednesday evenings. Last week, she told me about a garden she is trying to start behind her house, behind the fence line where she said the light is good in the late afternoon. I told her I would come help on the next long weekend I had. She said she would hold me to that. I don't know if what happened to me made me stronger. I know I am not carrying it anymore. And I know Carrie believed I would be that the shame would do what the silence was supposed to do, that I would absorb it and sit still with it and never put it down in a room where anyone could see. She built the whole calculation on that. She was wrong. I'm free. She did not expect that.